Kurt Simon is our speaker tonight. You may remember him from last year when he did Weird Science 1 and 2, very popular items. And now he's going to talk about another weird subject for astronomy, because we're not looking at the sky, we're looking down in the earth. He's going to be talking about planetary magnetism and what causes it. So got the same bio here as last time. Kurt has a PhD in systems engineering from UCLA. He worked for Rocketdyne on the rocket engines that went to the moon and worked for 31 years at TRW, developing data systems for satellite-based image and signal collection systems.
Most of you know that on the third Wednesday of every month, we have Astronomy on Tap. That's where at the 1849 Brewery in Grass Valley, you're all invited. We're a bunch of guys and gals who like to talk science and technology. Subject changes every meeting and frequently within the meeting, and they get more lively and knowledgeable after the first beer. Well, 4 years ago, we got talking about the fact that the Earth's poles were changing and worrying about whether we're all going to die. So I went out and did some research and volunteered to do a presentation on the Earth's magnetic field and what's happening to it. And last time we were at Astronomy on Tap, Greg and I were talking, and he said he needed somebody to do a presentation. And I said, well, I did this presentation 4 years ago, and nobody remembered it. It was memorable presentation. He said, oh, good, we can do it again. So I've actually added to it, and there's some interesting stuff I came up with to add to the end of it. So at any rate, I like the title, What's Up Down There? Talks about the inner structure of the Earth, planetary magnetism, and what all of that means to us. You all know that the Earth's magnetic field is what protects us from the sun. The Earth is really an energetic and lively place, and we would all be toast if it wasn't for the Earth's magnetic field. But where does it come from and what's happening to it? Well, let's take a look at some of the other planets. The Earth is relatively unique. The other solid planets, Mercury, Venus, don't have much of a magnetic moment to them because they don't have a dynamic interior such as the Earth has. Mars at one time did, but it's sort of all cooled down and there's not much going on. So there's not much magnetic field being generated. The gaseous planets, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, have a lot of circulation in there from metallic hydrogen and other things. And so they have very strong magnetic moments. Some of the planets, the magnetic field is at almost 90 degrees to what their rotation is. So it's, Earth is relatively unique, and I think that's part of the reason why we have life and they don't. Even the sun has a magnetic field, and if you wonder why sunspots go in a cycle and they rotate around the sun, it's partly because there are electric fields inside the sun, and those fields get dragged around the sun, and eventually they flip, and that's when we go through we get differential rotation in the sun of the surface of the sun. So here was the question we came up with. What's happening with the Earth's magnetic field? If it flips polarity, are we all going to die? Before global warming gets us, that is. And what's causing it and how do we know? Well, there's a book called North Pole, South Pole that I went off and read after our discussion at Astronomy on Tap. And a lot of this is based on that. And as I get towards the end of the briefing, there's a bunch of additional information. So where did our understanding of the Earth's magnetic field come from? Well, first we had to learn about magnetism, and that led us to compasses that would help us figure out where we were, the interrelationship between electric currents and magnetism, and then the Earth's structure itself. 3 years after I got my bachelor's degree in engineering, they finally decided on plate tectonics. They also, 3 years after I got my degree in engineering, they decided that the Big Bang was there. The universe hadn't existed forever. So it tells you how
And when did
relevant
they discover dinosaurs?
that was after I was. That was after. No, it was before my time. And we built some models of the Earth's magnet. So I'm going to talk about some of this stuff. Magnetism was discovered actually well before the 900 BC. First, we thought magnetism only came in magnetic rocks, which were lodestones hit by lightning. William Gilbert is known as the father of electricity and magnetism, or electrical engineering. In fact, the unit of magnetomotive force is called the Gilbert. So he figured out that the Earth was a magnet. And then we figured out that we could use that magnetic field to figure out where we were, at least to some extent. The earliest compass was in China around 1000 AD, and it took Europe another 1,000 years after that. At the time, they didn't know why the compass was pointed where they did. They thought maybe it was a pole star or lodestone mountains at the poles or something. But they noticed that it varied over time, that the direction to magnetic north was different over years. And you could see evidence of declination in ancient Chinese street directions, which I thought was interesting. If you look at the map of the Earth, I think you can see in the middle of the chart, you can see Africa. Over towards the left, you can see North and South America. You see Australia off to the right. And all those lines are the directions of various angles from magnetic north, called the declination. If I click on this chart here, let me see, does that work? Oh, here you can see going from 1600, you can see how the magnetic declination lines changed over time. So it's continually changing. It's not a static. It pretty much points to the fact that this is caused by a very dynamic function within the Earth. In fact, lately, the magnetic pole has been moving, and here you can see in the red there from 1620 to 1720, it was moving around. It used to move around about 9 kilometers per year, but lately it's been accelerating to 34 kilometers per year. And in 2020, it had gone up past the geographic North Pole, heading towards Siberia. So the fact that it's speeding up makes us think, well, gee, maybe it's going to flip all the way over. Well, we had to learn about magnetic force and electromagnetics. This book, North Pole, South Pole, is just an excellent description of how human knowledge grows. Starting in the 1700s, Gray figured out electrical conduction, then Coulomb, Volta, the energy storage. Then Ampere showed that currents and coils act as magnets. Faraday, who was uneducated, built the first electric motor and transformer. Maxwell actually tied it all together with some really elegant equations, very simple, but elegant equations. And then Marie Curie's husband pointed out that rocks lose magnetism above the Curie temperature, which is important to a few points I'm about to make. A dynamo is a motor that runs from magnetic force. Faraday developed the first motor where a metal disc rotating in a magnetic field would create a current from the axis of the disc to its edge. This is refined over the years to create motors and generators where currents in coils would force permanent magnets to move, most notably in rotation. So the rotor stator motor you see in the middle has electrical coils in the stator and magnets in the rotor, and the currents in the coils would cause a rotating magnetic field, which would cause the stator to rotate. And so you would end up with a motor. And I threw this in here just to brag about my Bolt EV. You can see the motor on the right is the Chevrolet Bolt EV. It's a motor about yay big, and it'll push that car with a 1,000-pound battery in it from 0 to 60 in about 6 seconds. So you can see the amount of force you can get out of a little tiny motor like that. So let's talk about the internal structure of the Earth and what might be causing these magnetic fields. In 550 BC, Pythagoras figured out the Earth was round. So all those flat Earth people just didn't get the memo. In 250 BC, Eratosthenes actually estimated to very close accuracy what the radius of the Earth was. And he did it by looking at the shadow of vertical poles at noon in separated locations, and then figuring out the geometry as it shows in the upper right diagram there. Cavendish in year 1800 figured out that the Earth is about 5.5 parts water and 2.5 parts rock, just from calculations of the density of the Earth. When I was a kid, I figured I was going to dig a hole to China, and I started. And I got down to about 5 feet when my dad made me fill it back in again. But there are some people who actually had much better luck at doing that. So we thought maybe we could figure out the internal structure of the Earth by digging a hole. We haven't gotten any. We got into 0.2% of the radius of the Earth, and I'm going to talk about some of those deep holes. Hopkins pointed out that the farther down you get, the hotter it gets, and you get melting, and then eventually solidification from the pressure. And a fellow by the name of Chandler showed that the Earth's rotational axis rotates. The chart that you see on the lower right is the pointing of the North Pole wobbling around, which shows that the innards of the Earth is non-rigid. We have a good way to take pictures of the interior of the Earth with seismology. Nuclear weapons blowing up or earthquakes going off will actually let us take a sonogram of the Earth, much like taking a picture of your unborn baby. So the traveling waves travel through fluids and solids, and transverse waves travel only through solids and are slower, but traveling waves go through fluids and solids. In 1778, they figured out that the interior is metallic at about 65% of the Earth's diameter. In 1926, hey, there's a liquid core down there. A lady by the name of Inga Lehman in 29 figured out that there's a solid inner core with about a 1,400 kilometer radius. Inga lived to be 102 and died about 10 years ago, having learned that her conjecture was indeed correct. And in 1954, we figured out that the poles are flipping and continents are drifting. So let's take a look at the inside of the Earth here for just a second. So the internal structure of the Earth, the lithosphere, or the crust, is solid but brittle. The oceanic crust is thinner and denser than the continental crust. The asthenosphere that you see in red there is more liquid than the rest of the mantle with low viscosity. The mesosphere is hotter and more rigid part of the mantle. If the radius of the Earth is represented by my height, the solid core would be about 14 inches high, about halfway up to my knee, about the size of our moon. And the liquid outer core would be about 39 inches high, about the size of Mars. The crust would be less than an inch thick. The solid core is over 4,500 degrees in temperature, or the same as a small star, an orange star, just from the pressure. The lines that you see on the left there are seismographic waves And they could tell by the fact that there was a big shadow on the opposite side of the earthquake that there was this outer core. But then they found that there were really some rays that were coming through the middle, and that had to be explained by the inner core, which is what Inga Lehman came up with. So by doing this seismology, they've been able to pretty well figure out what the internal of the Earth looks like. There's a science called paleomagnetism, where we're looking at the magnetic direction of ancient rocks. So molten rocks, when cooled, retain their current magnetic direction. Molten lava emerging from the Atlantic floor and pushing the continents apart retains evidence of the direction of the Earth's magnetic field when it cools. So I'll show you a picture of what that looks like. This Fred Vine at 65 said that mid-Atlantic ridge is spreading at almost 3 centimeters a year over millions of years, and showed 183 magnetic reversals in 80 million years, with an average about 230,000 years between reversals. We've gone 768 years since the last one, so we're about due. This is also validated by core samples. So this is a picture of the world's plates. A little hard to see, but in the middle, slightly above the equator, is North America. Below is South America. You can see Asia off on the left. But the major plates that you see there in different colors, the Pacific plate in yellow is rubbing against the North American plate, and that's what's going to cause the Cascadia fault, which is going to wipe out half of the northwest of the United States. The Filipino plate is rubbing against the Pacific plate, and that's what caused the equator, or the tsunami, big shakeup in Japan a few days ago. But you can see all of the plates, and they're all moving around. And you can't see that really, you can't see the movement in this picture as well as you can in this one. So this shows plate movement over 175 million years. At one time, there was this Pangea. The whole world was one big continent. And if this works, you can see them all move and go around to where they are today. Let me try and back that up. Do it again. One of the things I wanted to point out, which is I thought was interesting, if you look over on the right side of what will become Africa, you can see the Suez Canal. I'm going to go over and point to that. So the Suez Canal, I always thought that that broke up when this thing came apart, but it's there way back then. And when this whole thing rotates, it's just still there. I'll do it again. You can see it's still there. So the Suez Canal is not just recently split apart there, it's been there for quite a while.
It's a Red Sea.
Yes, the Red Sea into the Suez Canal, you're right. So in the mid-Atlantic, the crust is welling up in the mid-Atlantic and pushing the continents apart. So the diagram you see in the middle shows the pushing apart of the ocean floor, and they show magnetic polarity by whether it's white or colored. So the reverse magnetic polarity is the white areas. And so they can actually go in and look at the magnetic polarity along the ocean floor, and they can show that the polarity is changing on an average about every 80 million years. And as I said, we've gone 768 million since the last time it happened. So what's causing all this? Well, in 1919, a fellow by the name of Larmor said, well, there's a self-sustaining dynamo in the liquid core. All that movement in the liquid core with metals in it is causing magnetic field to be generated. A couple of UCLA professors solved the dynamo equations on a Cray computer that took them 2,000 hours on the Cray and a year to do the analysis, which showed that the outer core field is more unstable than the inner core. And the simulation exhibited reversal at 40,000 simulated years. And this is what that looked like. Between reversals, the magnetic lines, the orange and blue lines that you see spreading out, during a reversal, they get all scrambled up because what's happening is all that movement below the surface is getting unstable. There's a phenomenon right now called the South Atlantic anomaly. The magnetic field strength there is sufficiently weak that some low altitude satellites have failed because they're not protected from the radiation of the sun. Appears to be caused by a dipping of the Van Allen belt close to Earth, caused by the current magnetic axis being displaced from the center of the Earth. So if you look at the diagram on the right, there's a little tiny red dot, which is the center of the magnetic axis, which is displaced from the geographic axis. And it's caused the magnetic field to dip close to the surface of the geographic Earth. And so that has meant that we get high levels of radiation in the lower Atlantic. On the left, you can see the red area in the lower Atlantic where the magnetic field strength is not protecting the lower altitude satellites from damage. So what powers all of this? Well, we got all this heat down at the core, the solid core, and that bubbles up just like heat rising in the atmosphere or in the ocean. At the same time, the Earth is rotating, and that's causing Coriolis effects that are causing that all to be scrambled up. And they actually have jet streams that form below the surface in the magma. The Earth might feel solid, but it's a seething mess down there. And all of that movement is causing, looks like electrical currents that's causing magnetic fields. So once again, Earth's subsurface has an inner core about 1,500 miles in diameter, at 10,800 degrees Fahrenheit, which is the same as the surface of the sun. It's got an outer liquid core of molten rock, another 1,500 miles thick, roughly the size of Mars. A mantle of magma and rock, 1,800 miles thick, which ranges from 392 degrees Fahrenheit near the crust to 7230 down near the liquid core. The crust is only 15 to 35 miles thick, and under the ocean's only 3 to 5. And at 7.5 miles below the surface are 2.7 billion year old rocks at 356 degrees Fahrenheit. How do we know that? Well, there have been numerous deep hole drilling projects. These are people who were serious about digging a hole to China. Actually, if they tried digging a hole to China from here, they'd end up someplace near Australia, so that doesn't work. But the Russians dug actually 5 holes starting in 1989, got all the way down to 12,262 meters, which is about 7.5 miles. They gave up on it in 94 because they ran out of money. They found water at 3 to 6 kilometers, plankton fossils at 20,000 feet, and a large quantity of hydrogen. Changed their whole perspective on the structure of the Earth down at that depth. And the temperatures they measured were twice as hard as the predictions. The Chinese have started another hole recently where they plan to dig down to 11,000 meters. And why? Probably interested in minerals, rare earths, oil, and geothermal energy, which I'm going to talk more about. The limit to how far they can go is largely determined by the heat, which can actually melt the drill bits, and the weight of the shaft, because the longer you go, the more weight you got, and the shaft won't support its own weight. So they're probably got to the bottom of where they're going to go, and that works out to be a very small percentage of the thickness of the crust. One of the videos that I found said that the Earth was the radius of your arm. The deepest hole they've dug is about a 50th of an inch into your arm. So they haven't gotten very far. Although they're looking at ways of using energy beams blasting down the middle of the hole to melt the rock even further down. So who knows what's coming up next. One of the more promising applications of this is geothermal energy. Geothermal energy is where you use the heat from under the surface of the Earth to generate power. It's continuously available worldwide. There's no greenhouse emissions or radioactive waste. It's got lower lifetime emissions than anything else, but it needs 705 degrees Fahrenheit, 1300 PSI water or brine in order to generate enough power to make it work. So what happens is the hot subsurface brine comes up, they use it, they separate the steam from the brine, you use the steam to run turbines, and then send the brine back down the well. And I'm going to show you some examples of doing that, because turns out it can supply the United States with all the lithium that they want for the next 100 years. Lithium mining in the United States. The two big things that are going on right now is they just discovered a caldera at the border of Nevada and Oregon that has an estimated $1 trillion worth of lithium in it. 20 to 40 million tons, or the equivalent of 2.8 billion electric vehicles. It's going to require some excavation, and there are already billboards up down there saying life, not lithium. And the Indians think it's sacred ground, so we'll have to see if they can dig that up. But the geothermal wells often contain very large amounts of lithium. The brine that comes up contains lithium, calcium, and other minerals, and some rare earths, as a matter of fact. The Salton Sea has been generating geothermal energy for some time. It turns out that Berkshire Hathaway is a big investor in geothermal energy near the Salton Sea. I think they got like 10 plants down there doing it. And they've discovered that the brine that comes up is just laced with lithium. And they have a process now for extracting the lithium from the brine and then sending the brine back down again. And they figure that right now they're producing 400 megawatts of energy, from those plants, which will supply 350,000 homes. But they figure they can get 600,000 tons of lithium carbonate out of that per year. And they expect to be completely operational by the end of this year. Requires no evaporation ponds like you see in the news, or excavation. There's no waste products or any other environmental impact, and apparently it's going to be the economic salvation of the Salton Sea. So any place you can bring up geothermal energy is a good candidate for extracting lithium as well. That with the development of these two sources, the U.S. will be completely self-sufficient in lithium for the foreseeable future. So the people who say, well, EVs aren't going to work, there's not enough lithium, they're completely wrong, with no environmental impact. But wait, that's not all. Here's the other big flap. The Earth's inner core stopped spinning. There's some Chinese scientists who measured the rotation of the Earth's core using seismology. And they figured out that they thought the core had stopped. And I think what stopped here means is it was rotating at the same rate as the crust back in 2009. used to spin faster than the mantle, and now it's starting to go backwards. There was a movie out called The Core, which is full of scientific crap. Just started to watch it and couldn't stand it. It turns out that this differential rotation happens about every 70 years or so. And an important factor is it doesn't contribute at all to the Earth's magnetic field. So we're not going to die because of that either. I originally was going to came up with several videos, YouTube videos, that really explained with diagrams all of this about geothermal energy and lithium mining and core rotation and all that sort of thing. The book I talked about at the beginning, North Pole, South Pole, I highly recommend it. As I said, not only does it talk about are we going to die from the poles flipping, we're not. Usually takes 1,000 or 2 years for it to reverse direction anyway. And it's happened so many times, and it's never been an extinction event. But the book I thought was excellent. There's a bunch of other references I put on here regarding the magnetic field. What I'm going to try and do is I've got a bunch of YouTube videos about digging deep holes, about geothermal energy, about the core spinning, about lithium extraction and mining. And what I'm going to try and do is put these as links below the YouTube video on our YouTube channel. So you can click on them and watch them. You won't have the benefit of me stripping out the advertisements and stuff like that as I started to do. But this is probably a third of the YouTube videos I watched to pull all of this information together. And they're very entertaining. With all of these links, at the next Astronomy on Tap, there's going to be a quiz. And
Is there a prize?
yes, you get to dig a hole to China. And that concludes my notes, and I'll answer any questions if you got any.
Yes, ma'am.
Well, as really a lay person to all of this, my concern about when we discover something and we get excited about it. Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. When we discover something, we all get all excited about it, and then we go at it full tilt. And it seems the Earth in its development, you know, it has its own timetable. And then when we go and we start doing something 10, 20, 30 times more than the natural process, and we keep saying, well, there's no impact, I find that hard to believe, because there's so much we don't know until we start doing something and someone says, oh God, we never thought of that. So are there no concerns about, again, with the Salton Sea suddenly going full tilt? They don't think, because if we're changing the whole process instead of this natural process that's going on.
Well, everything that, well, you can see from what I put on there and how we learned about magnetism and the structure of the Earth, all that, it's taken us centuries to refine our knowledge. So our knowledge grows and grows, and it grows by continually testing it. Salton Sea in particular is a catastrophe area already because the sea is drying up, the water is polluted with agricultural runoff, there's arsenic and all kinds of things in there. And as it dries up, all of those pollutants blow in the air, the economy of the area is a catastrophe. What this is going to do is revitalize the area. So all of these things have impact. Take the caldera. If we're going to dig up the lithium, we have to make the decision, what's more important, lithium or Indian rights to sacred land, and all that has to be worked out. And the only way to work it out is to go at it. And there are lots of advocates on all sides, and so that's how things get worked out.
There's usually surprises, is what I'm saying.
And there are always surprises, and the only way you get to the surprises is to do the investigations. That's how we discovered that the Earth had a solid core. You know? Oh, that was a surprise. Well, what are we going to do about it? Well, I think in the movie they drilled a deep hole and put a nuclear weapon down there and started spinning again.
The deep hole,
So, part of what we didn't talk about tonight had to do with how much thermal energy is still down there, whether it's being depleted just naturally, is it cooling off, or is, what effect does the moon have on it? In the tidal version, we've learned the moons around Jupiter and Saturn that are getting tidally heated up. Is any of that going on, or has anybody done any studies? Oops,
Well, the dynamics of the Earth at this point are such that the moon can have negligible impact on it. The temperature of the core is the same as the temperature of the sun's surface. And it's because of radiation and pressure. There are radioactive elements down there. There are things that are not going to be depleted by anything that we mere mortals at the very tippy edge of the Earth can ever accomplish. So we can have very little influence on the heat structure of the Earth. It'd be like trying to influence the heat structure of the sun. So I don't think we're at any risk at this point of slowing down the Earth or turning it into a Mars. But you can be sure that if there's a scientist that says that there's heat down there, there's another one that says you better don't mess with it. You know? One of the beauties of science is that there's so many different opinions on it until we come up with a consensus. So I'm not worrying about the fact that it's rotating backwards. I'm not worrying about the fact that it's going to flip in polarity. I'm not worrying about any of that stuff. Global warming is going to get us first anyway. If the Ukrainians, I mean the Russians don't.
I don't know if it's any interest in anybody, but back on the lithium, months back on NPR, I heard that there's only one mine in the United States that's drilling for lithium. I don't remember it being Nevada and Oregon border.
I think that's out of date.
Huh?
That's way out of date. We have enough lithium sources within the United States right now to provide all the lithium that the world needs for many years.
Okay, well, what I was going to bring up was they did say that it was that there was a new mine. Well, it's not actually a mine yet. They discovered lithium up in Maine, and they're just having to proceed with, I guess, whatever the rigmarole is on getting it active, in order to mine. I guess it takes a couple of years for it to go through.
Yeah, you got to work all the issues of environmental impacts.
Yeah.
How many lithium mines are there in the United States?
I can't tell you, but there are a lot. There are several sources of lithium within the United States. It turns out that lithium is one of the most prolific elements outside of iron and lead and zinc. So there are a lot of places where we're going to find more lithium.
And it's used, it's energy, it's to produce energy,
Yeah, the lithium is used to store energy.
store energy.
Right.
Oh, the
so-
batteries, et cetera.
Right, batteries. So if you're going to build a solar wind farm, a solar and wind farm that isn't producing electricity all the time, if you have a large enough battery storage, you can provide continuous on-demand energy wherever you need it. if you don't have the battery storage, then you gotta have backup power, so when the wind stops and the sun goes down, you can fire up your natural gas power plant. So the storage keeps you from having to fire up the natural gas power plant. But, and there are other techniques, other technologies other than lithium. China is starting to, and I think Ford announced they're gonna come out with a Taurus that uses sodium batteries, not lithium. Sodium batteries are bigger and heavier, but you can still get storage enough to build a relatively cheap car.
Lithium is also used as an antidepressant, we might need more of that.
Sodium is an antidepressant.
Lithium.
Lithium,
Oh, lithium, is an antidepressant.
Right, that's right.
bipolar, yeah.
Yeah, I didn't know that. Now I'm glad I found that out.
I have a question. So how can you be sure that the change in polarity isn't gonna disrupt the Van Allen belts and cause a problem? Especially with that South Atlantic issue.
It probably will. As they flip, you know, right now the magnetic field is dropping in intensity, and it has for some years, as we're getting closer and closer to a flip event. And it probably will happen in a few thousand years. So, you know, there's
You're not
lots
worried
of
about
things that are gonna happen before then. And the Earth there haven't been no extinction events from the flip that's happened in the past. Of course, it's
Been only some
it
deaths.
hasn't flipped since man's been here.
It has flipped?
It has not flipped since man has been here. So
So we
maybe
better
I should
hope
worry.
What's lithium look like? I mean, is it lithium, that's a,
What does it look like?
yeah, I mean, what, physically?
Well, the stuff I've seen is lithium carbonate, and it looks like powdery salt.
Okay.
And
I just wondered, I didn't know if it was a gas or.
No.
Chemical.
they extract it from lithium carbonate, I think it is.
It has 3 protons and 3 neutrons.
Yes,
It's a very light metal.
it's the third most abundant
It's
element
like
in the
aluminum or
universe.
something, but it's a very, very light metal.
Oh,
Any idea why lithium occurs in the geothermal brine? I mean,
It's not the only thing. Lithium's not the only thing that is in the brine. You get other things like calcium, potassium, other kinds of, it's just stuff that's in the
soil.
It's in the
down
crust.
there in the earth,
okay,
along
so
with,
a lot of other things.
yeah. And not all deep wells have the ability to do geothermal. Most of there are something like, I don't know, 80 geothermal wells currently producing gigawatts of power. There's a geothermal plant just north of Reno on I-80. There's geothermal plants in Iceland, several, because they're right close to the surface, and so they can get all the heat without having to dig too deeply.
Including geysers north of Santa Rosa, Geyserville.
Geyserville, north of Santa Rosa.
Yeah, north of Santa Rosa, about an hour,
Yeah.
50 miles north of Santa Rosa.
And I bet if they look at the brine up there, they may find some lithium as well.
Oh,
The neat thing about that is there's no mining involved. They're already bringing the brine up. Before they send it back down, all they do is they run it through a process which extracts the lithium out of it, and they send it back down again. So it's going to have very little impact on the salt sea, and it's going to save their economy at the same time. Warren Buffett's Berkshire Hathaway has done a lot of the investment there. Elon Musk was negotiating to buy a company that was building geothermal plants there, and the thing went sour, and so the company went under. But there's like, I think 11 plants in the Salton Sea right now doing geothermal energy. So taking lithium out is not gonna make any difference. No negative difference. And this is all important to me because I got 2 electric vehicles.
Maybe the Great Salt Lake has lithium.
Yeah, Salt Lake, yeah. Yep. Well, the way they do lithium mining elsewhere, like in Africa and places like that, is they dig it up and then they spread this brine out across giant fields and they wait for it to evaporate. Then they gather up the lithium and process it. That's got a horrendous impact on the environment. But this seems like a real clean way to do it.
Thanks for being good.
Thank you, Kurt.